Nevada's cultural heritage is known worldwide, and it's as varied as our bright neon cities and rugged wilderness landscapes. Every week, the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs brings a piece of that heritage to your living rooms through our documentary series, Exploring Nevada. I'm producer and host Gwen Clancy. Welcome to the colorful world of cultural affairs. In today's episode, we travel to Tonopah, halfway between Reno and Las Vegas, to a one-of-a-kind historic mining park. There you'll find land, equipment, and buildings just as they've been for the past century, in tribute to the area's rich mining history. To understand the significance of what took place here, we'll talk with several longtime Nevadans who know this place well, and we'll get a rare tour of the historic Foundry by none other than the grandson of the man who established it 100 years ago. Our story begins on a cool and blustery day inside one of the old mining buildings, with a man who played a key role in developing the park into an outdoor museum. I asked him what makes this place so special.
Well, just like we're sitting in this building with the creaking and moaning, it's the ambiance of being 100 years in the past when mining was at its peak here in Nevada. The mining park, that's the whole goal of the mining park, is to provide people a chance to step back into history and see things that otherwise they just wouldn't see anywhere else in the state or maybe even the West.
There's a lot of things that are lying around on the banks.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, we could clean up the grounds and make it pristine, but the whole idea is that a lot of what's here has been dumped by miners many years ago. And so that we want to keep that look of how it was 100 years ago when this was an active operation. And by having our walking tour, people can basically walk for over a mile throughout we have 110 acres here, and they can walk through pretty much everything and see the way things were.
You use the term arrested decay.
Yes. There's a big difference between arrested decay and actual restoration. We're doing arrested decay because, again, it goes back to the ambience. We want people to be able to enjoy the sensation of stepping back into history. And by keeping the buildings interior the way they were 100 years ago, it gives people a real good sense of the hardships and also the activities that the miners and their families went through. We put in a 40-foot bridge over one of our open mines, and that's kind of turned into the thrill ride for the mining park because they can walk out to the middle of the bridge and basically look down about 400 or 500 feet and actually see the interior workings of the mine.
When the early day prospectors first came upon Tonopah, they were hoping to find gold. But as the story goes, Jim and Belle Butler and their famous burro stumbled upon ore that turned out to be rich in silver. The discovery set off a bonanza that would draw thousands to the middle of the state, including a Mrs. C.D. Preble, identified in this rare photograph as a most successful prospector of Alaska and Nevada. Tonopah would also offer up such sights as a dog riding down Main Street on a packed burro. Ultimately, the mines would generate $150 million in silver, gold, and copper ore. The collection of John Heiser, on display at the mining park, gives a good idea of the precious metals found here and elsewhere around the state. For a deeper understanding of what was going on, we turn to a much-respected Nevada geologist and prospector who has likely covered more of the state by foot or four-wheel drive than anyone else living today.
This is a chunk of high grade here, which they apparently never mined. Just right, maybe it's too narrow, but I can tell just by looking at it that it's high grade silver. It's got that grayish quartz with some dark speckles in it. That's what they saw. Lots of that stuff, just boulders, what we call float, just laying on the surface. Right. And it should have been all over here because there's so many of these veins. And of course the material would spread away from the veins to a certain extent, so they would have been float all over the place here.
John, do you think that there's gold in there, or silver?
Silver, yeah, yes, I'm almost sure there is, just looking at it.
Would it be worth anybody's time to want to dig it out?
Well, no, it's not wide enough. It had to be at least 4 feet wide. When Jim Butler came through this country in 1900. He claims that he was wandering through here and a burro kicked up a vein specimen. That seems like kind of a far-fetched story because, as you can see, these veins, there's a whole series of veins outcropping here. This whole area must have been covered with high-grade float, so I don't know how he could have missed it. Didn't need a burro to find it. Anybody that knew rocks would have. It's a miracle this was not discovered early because just below us here is kind of a natural path through the mountains. Anyway, it wasn't found, but so when he did find it, he got a bunch of people in here and he said, okay, I'll give you 50 feet on the vein and you mine that vein. You got 50 feet and I'll give you till the end of the year. You can take out as much as you want and you have to pay me a royalty, of course. So you can imagine these guys came here and they just started digging around the surface and how they must have worked feverishly night and day to get out. And of course they mined this tremendously high-grade ore and they put it in sacks and in wagons and hauled it all the way by wagon load, all the way to the railroad, which at that time was 40 miles from here, on big wagons and all that high-grade ore. A lot of this ore was running about $200 a ton at that time, and those fellows made a lot of money. Then after that, the company took over, and of course, then it was mined differently. They sunk shafts and came underneath and started mining the ore. But they, at the start, they just started right on the surface and just started digging, going right down the veins. You're seeing one vein here, which is the Mizpah vein. That's the most famous. It had the biggest production, but this is one of, there's the Burrow and the Lone Star, and there's about 10 veins in here, all outcropping. This is the Burrow vein. This is another vein that was productive, but not quite as productive as the Mizpah, but a very good vein. These are all of these veins are very high-grade ore at the surface, very high-grade. And here you can see the veins even wider, but they're mining, and still it's open down almost 300 feet. And of course they mine even below that, but it's only open down 300 feet there. They mined in this vein down over 1,000 feet, actually. The ore was mined from below, and that's why it's all open. They would mine up from below, mine a stage at a time, and then let the ore, as it was blasted and broken, it would fall down, and they would collect it down below, haul it over the shaft, and raise it to the surface. Yeah, this is the silver top shaft up here, which is one of the better producers. Those cars would go right in the cage, you see, and they'd lower them down and fill them up with ore. Then they'd haul them back up and they'd push the cars out along the track and dump them in the bin. Sometimes they may have been mining for more than one different property. So that's what these are. You've got several bins here. And this is the one here, of course, that goes to the railroad car. And they would put the waste out on these big piles out here, you can see. And then the ore would go down in the railroad cars, gondolas, and it would be hauled down to millers, which is where the milling operation took place.
Once underground mining was in full production, an army of equipment was developed to lift the precious metallic ore out of the ground.
Years ago, there was one guy in town, and he was on the payroll for cable splicing, and mainly for this type of cable, and they paid him whether he did anything or not, just so he'd be in town and splice it.
You had to weave it, right?
Had to weave it.
It's almost like you'd weave cloth. That's the way they repaired it.
Mm-hmm. And it had a long knife thing with a T-handle on it and stick it through. And
That was a specialized skill then.
yeah.
To manufacture and replace parts, a foundry was necessary. And that's when John Campbell's grandfather stepped into the picture.
The mining industry here, I don't think would have existed as well as it did if it hadn't been for the foundry and machine shop, because you can't have a mine and a mill without having parts to go along with it. The foundry and the machine shop was started by some investors to take care of the problem of broken equipment in the mines that they had to, early days they had to send it to the Bay Area to get repaired, and get new equipment made. They made their first pour January 30th of 1906, and my grandfather got involved in it in about March or April of '06. In 1915 it burned down, and then the foundry and machine shop were separated, And as you can see by these photos we had from the early days, the machine shop looks pretty much the way it does today, with the addition of a little office building. On the back of one of these trucks there's a 1918 license plate, so it pretty much dates the photo. And there's an addition on the building on the back, but other than that it's the same. After the shop burned down in '15, Grandpa and Kelly had an opportunity to relocate to another city, and they decided just to stay here and take care of the customers. This business in its heyday employed about 25 to 30 employees, paid a good payroll. According to newspaper articles, it paid better than other comparable businesses in the country. This was a picture of a building uptown. They had part of their business there. This is.
Go back. Is your grandfather in that picture?
No, it was some other gentleman. I think maybe a customer or just the guys that come by to shoot the breeze during the day. This other photo is from our location here, looking back towards the machine shop. So you can, as you can tell, it's pretty much the same what it was then. The chain hoists are pretty much in the same spot. And for the last 20 years or so, I've been building fire trucks, and I got involved in that back in about 1980, 78, 80, and that's pretty much what I've been doing, because the machine shop and the foundry is business is gone. And this is the pattern shop. I'm going to shut the door because it's a little bit cool out there. This is all the original equipment. The equipment, the tools that were painted green, I believe, were ones that went through the fire, because green was a pretty popular color in the old days. As you can see, it was 1903 was when the patent number was on the Oliver table saw. And there's a planer and a bandsaw, and then over in the corner is a drill press and a wood lathe. The pattern maker had himself and sometimes one helper.
Would this hole be usable today? Can you use it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's all wired for 480 volt too, and the OSHA approved switch box. This has got a cabinet with a real door on it. Wood box with the blade switch, 480 volt. Generally many times there'd be somebody come in and the customer would bring in a sketch similar to this, located in these old file boxes with just a pencil sketch on scratch paper.
Are those the original ones, like old?
Yeah.
What's the date on that one?
Oh, I don't have a date on it. It's just Bell disc inliner for a ball mill, I think. Bring it to the draftsman, bring it to the office and talk to the grandpa or whoever was in the office, and they'd give it to a draftsman. And mining companies, all of them had engineers and stuff around, so these were different blueprints for different pieces of equipment that they draw up. One of the popular items they needed at the mines were the painting gear, and it was similar to this one. It was made out of redwood. Once they brought the engineering down, or a drawing or a sketch of it, they'd give it to the pattern maker, and he was a crackerjack craftsman. He'd utilized a wood lathe. They made the round part similar to this. Then they take it over. They had to make each tooth individually, and they take it over to the bandsaw, and they carve each tooth out of a separate piece of wood and then place them on the cylinder. They'd index them on the cylinder to where they needed to be, and they'd locate them on with brads and some glue. Shellac usually was the glue, and they cut them separately on here, and then that was your primary finished pattern. Then it was sent over to the foundry to have it put in a mold and poured. In the early days, before forklifts and before anything else, the iron and the coke was to fire the cupola. It was fired with coke, and it was brought in on a little mine car on this little trestle up to the second floor up here, and they fed the cupola from up there. So many pounds of coke to so many pounds of iron for the pours they needed to make. The coke originally came from Belgium because it was cleaner. It didn't have as much sulfur in it as the U.S. coke. So it came from, they loaded on ships and brought it around to Cape Horn from South America and into San Francisco, and brought it over on the railroad to Tonopah to run it through the foundry. This is the entrance to the foundry. As you can see, it's got a wheelbarrow board there. The iron cupola is on my left side here. That's a cupola for iron cupola. It's for melting iron, cast iron. Like they manufactured an engine, overhead valve engine here years ago that they put in automobiles and then used for power units. This is the blower. It's got a Roots blower. It was for blowing air to keep to melt the iron in the cupola. These were oil-fired furnaces to melt brass and aluminum. As you can see, this is fire clay, and these got hot enough to melt brass and aluminum. And you can see by the board there that it set fire to it a few times also. This is a bigger lathe. They called it a bull lathe that would turn 8 feet in diameter, and they use it for their larger castings. Sometimes they put their pump castings on here to do the machine work on the mating surfaces, or like a shiv wheel for a mine or something. They'd put it in here and do the machine work to it. But it was one of the bigger pieces of equipment. This is the second electric refrigerator that came to Tonopah. The guy that ran the hardware store got the first one, and Grandpa got the second one. So, as you can see, one of the old boys left his hat here after his day at work, and also somebody left their shoe here. I don't have any idea who would have had a small enough foot to fit that, but it could have been one of the relatives, or it goes from past times that are still hanging around. I also think these old timers that used to work here were shorter than I am also.
Do you bump into things?
Yeah, some of the control boards are all about a foot too long. I came along and I had to saw a few of them off so I could walk around without bumping our heads. Down at the other end here, there were some old molding boxes that have been around since the 30s that were rammed up and never poured or used. And we'll go take a look at those. This pattern I'm carrying would now have been placed in a molding box similar to what we're going to look at here. These are metal boxes. A lot of them were sand boxes, or wooden frame boxes. This pattern would have been set down in some sand, and then the sand was tapped around it, and then this would be pulled out. This is just molding sand. They purchased it originally, and then later on they dug it out from sagebrush down here by Miller's down in the flat. It was clean sand, and generally they wanted sand that didn't have any vegetation in it, so once it made it through a couple of pours, the vegetation would have been burned out of it. But as you can see, it's still good and hard and pretty good shape for being around since the late 30s or so. And then you'd pour the iron in the one hole, and it would come up on the other hole, and then when they got around to, after it cooled, they'd pull these apart and break the sand away from it, and it would leave an iron or brass or aluminum shaped gear similar to that. It would they'd take you then and knock the barnacles off it and take it over to the machine shop for final machining. Now we're going to put the pattern back into storage. This is pattern number 2927. So we'll go in and catalog it, put it back on the shelf where it came from. Back in my grandfather's time, the building was called the Pattern Loft, and it was just a storage area for the patterns that were going to be used and those that were made, because you never knew when you were going to have to use them again. And we're going to put this one back on the shelf for future use, as they would have in the old days. As you can see, there's patterns for almost every kind of a machine that was used in the mines in the early days. There were ball mill ball patterns, which had half a ball on each side, and they were used for grinding ore. There are various sizes of those. These were patterns for gears that were made here. That pinion gear would drive against a gear similar to this to change the speed of whatever it is they were using it for. Like these were grates for the old wood stove, and so you can see they made parts for almost everything that needed cast iron. Again, they made castings out of brass, aluminum, and iron, gray iron, and they were mainly famous for their mud pumps in the early days. They were made out of hard iron, and they lasted a long time, and they were sold all over the world also. But one of the biggest drawbacks to that was the freight was the killer.
Cost too much to send it?
Yeah. There's several thousand patterns. I think they had a catalog, and they had of the different mining companies, and they had all the patterns were written on them as to what company they were for and what they were, piece of equipment they were used on, and they had a number on them, and then they'd go through and had the different shelves, and it would be cataloged like a library would be. You can go and find those things you need, but without the catalog, it's kind of a hunt and peck deal to try to figure out where parts or where the patterns are for the different machines that you might want to rebuild for whatever reason.
Do you ever get tempted to wish that your grandfather's ghost could come and like give you the pattern?
Yeah, sometimes at night you're kind of wondering once in a while as to if there isn't a ghost of my grandfather. He was killed here in a windstorm, putting tin back on the roof, and in the pattern shop there was a pattern maker was killed making a pattern on the lathe, and so there's liable to be some old ghosts around here that you just kind of hope they're proud of you rather than being mad at you for whatever it is you've done to their earlier times.
With the pattern put away, the final step of the process would have been to take the metal casting to the machine shop for smoothing out on the lathe.
Earlier we saw the pattern and the molding of it in the foundry, and this is the end result of what it would have been after then it was brought to the machine shop for finished machining. And this lathe was, it's a Cincinnati. It's had a lot of wear and tear over the years, but it still works fine. I'm gonna line it up and take a cut off of it. This is my lining up board. It's a small piece of wood with a file on it, the edge. And what we do is just spin it around and look down the edge of the file and see which way it needs to go, and then you can just pull it back and forth and push it back and forth around. The machine shop is powered with a 7-horse motor up in the rafters on this, from that 7-horse motor over there is located, and then on this big wooden pulley it's driven. And I'll go start it up here for you. The gearing on the lathe, this is a back gear, and then you vary the speed also by changing we'll go from a larger pulley to a smaller pulley or back and forth. And it's got a clutch on this one. Some of them have idler pulleys and drive pulleys. It's a little bit slower than they are today, but it still works fine also. We were tempted a few times when business was good to put a little more modern machine in, but the machine never came and the cost was never there that warranted it, so we just stayed with the old machines. They're still in good shape. It makes quite a bit of noise, but it kind of harmony after a while. It's all powered on 480 volt power. It's different working with old equipment, and it kind of gives you a tie to the past and how things were then versus how they are today. I kind of enjoy it, and I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to serve the country or the area with the services we have. I guess we'll be here the rest of my life.
With all the first-hand knowledge John Campbell has acquired over the years, he's become an invaluable resource at the adjacent Tonopah Mining Park.
We've got a lot of equipment that's still in here that is usable to this day. All you need is what? An engine, and just start this up and get everything running?
Turn the power on or turn the switch on and it should go.
It's just amazing. It is amazing that, something like this can sit here for years and years, just idle, collecting dust, and just be ready to go at a moment's notice. So when you're looking for a place to go, a vacation spot, a weekend getaway, you want to come to Tonopah. You want to see the sights, you want to see the history and the people that are here and talk to them. You'll get a great lesson and you'll love it and you'll want to come back again.
The Tonopah Mining Park is a fantastic tourist attraction. It's really been a remarkable evolution, seeing a small effort turn into a growing concern. It attracts people because it's magic. They have fantastic resources there, and they've been rehabilitating them step by step, partly with the help of the Commission for Cultural Affairs, but also with just a lot of local enthusiasm. We're very proud of what they've accomplished.
Please join us in preserving and celebrating our state's colorful heritage. Call 775-684-3448 or visit us at nevadaculture.org. Besides administering grants, the Preservation Office maintains state and national registers of historic places and runs the State Historic Marker Program. The Preservation Office is part of the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs, along with the State Library and Archives, Nevada Arts Council, and Division of Museums and History. Through these agencies, the state of Nevada offers a wealth of cultural programs for residents and visitors alike. We invite you to check out our website or call 775-687-8323 in Carson City. And see you next time on Exploring Nevada.